Laden and his millions. New information on how he makes his money, where he hides it, and what we're doing to track it down. America's Most Wanted. Can a U.S. television program help bring them to justice? America's Most Wanted joins the global war on terror. Safety in the skies. What pilots are telling passengers before they take off. Is it helping or just downright scary? Welcome to Tracking Terrorism, our hour-long look at the latest on home front security and on the investigation of the terrorist attacks. I'm Dan Abrams. Right now, we want to get you up to date on the latest. The Immigration and Naturalization Service said today that at least 9 of the 19 hijackers were in the U.S. legally at the time of the September 11th attacks. 3 others entered the country legally but overstayed their visas. The INS was unable to get full information on the other 7 hijackers. President Bush and Treasury Secretary Paul O'Neill announced less than an hour ago that a total of $24 million had been seized from al-Qaeda and the Taliban. And a $10 million check from a Saudi prince for the World Trade Center relief effort was rejected by New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani today. Giuliani was upset over comments the prince made after touring the World Trade Center site. The prince said the U.S. should re-examine its policies in the Middle East to address some of the issues that led to the terrorist attack. Congress continues to discuss proposed legislation aimed at protecting Americans against more potential terrorist attacks, but there are some sticking points. NBC's Joe Johns joins us from the Capitol Hill. Well, the latest, Joe, I have something in my hand that I think you're going to tell us about with regard to some agreement on aviation security.
Well, what you're talking about, obviously, is the vote in the Senate on the issue of arming pilots, giving pilots the right to bear arms, as it were, in the cockpit to protect itself. Is certainly a fairly controversial measure on Capitol Hill. The Senate apparently saying they'd like to go for it. There are a number of members of Congress, including the House Democratic leader Richard Gephardt, who has said he doesn't like the idea very much. So as this aviation security bill makes its way through the Congress, that will be one of the things the House and the Senate will have to work out. Another issue apparently resolved, at least for now, is the issue of giving some type of compensation to airline workers who were laid off or lost their jobs as a result of the attacks on September 11th. The Senate, in a test vote, decided to not go forward with that. A lot of disappointment among Democrats. It would have given $1.9 billion to about 140,000 workers. Senator Tom Daschle, the Democratic majority leader, saying he's disappointed.
Grave disappointment at what the Senate has just done. This is the first time we've said no to any of the victims of the disaster of 1 month ago. The first time that we have said no to working families struggling to put their lives back together. I am troubled, disappointed, disillusioned.
So, besides that, there's also some movement on the counterterrorism bill here on Capitol Hill, an indication the House of Representatives will have that bill on the floor tomorrow. As you know, Dan, it was a bill that the Attorney General has asked for again and again. The administration has said they really need a whole series of new laws in order for the Justice Department to more effectively go after terrorists. Apparently, the House is going to move forward with that tomorrow. Back to you.
Now, Joe, give us a sense of where we stand on this. You know, the note that we just received in our file here, which, of course, comes from you all over at the Capitol, says the Senate unanimously passes amendment allowing pilots to carry a firearm if they are properly trained. The amendment permits the FAA to allow pilots, co-pilots, or flight engineers to carry a firearm after completing proper training. It's what you just talked about. Right. What is the status now? I mean, we know the Senate has passed the amendment, but where does this mean we are procedurally in terms of it actually being enacted?
Right. Well, what you have to do first is pass the amendment, then you have to pass the entire bill, of course. that aviation security bill, which has a number of other controversial issues in it that are going to have to be worked out when the House passes its version. Of course, one of the big things on the House side they have to deal with is the question of federalizing the people who handle the baggage in airports. A number of Democrats saying they'd very much like to do that, but a lot of conservatives say they don't like the idea at all. They don't think that federalizing people who work in airports handling bags will improve security to any extent. So they're going to have to get together on these bills and decide what both sides can agree to and what both sides can't. And of course, that might not be as easy as a lot of people think, and many people are concerned that Congress is taking far too long with this, that with the United States already engaged in hostilities abroad, here at home, Congress ought to move more swiftly to enact protections for air passengers.
All right, Joe Johns, thanks very much. Just unbelievable that we're talking about arming our pilots, something I don't think any of us would have thought of just a month ago. Like so many other places around the country, Capitol Hill is limiting access to vehicles. No large commercial truck traffic is allowed near the Capitol building. Well, today was the first day for that rule. Nearly 200 trucks were turned away, causing quite a little traffic, backups, and, not surprisingly, lots of confusion in the nation's capital. In Florida, the anthrax scare, there is now officially a criminal investigation. A third person at the Florida offices of American Media was exposed to anthrax. Earlier on today, Attorney General John Ashcroft talked about the investigation.
I have absolutely no evidence to indicate that the anthrax in Florida was stolen from any lab. We do have the kind of investigation that investigates criminal acts, and it's fair to say that it's that kind of investigation, and we are very concerned, working very closely with the Centers for Disease Control. Of course, they have expertise in the analysis of these kinds of substances.
At this hour, the Office of American Media, home to many of the nation's best-known tabloids, is still considered a crime scene and a potentially dangerous one. More than 1,000 people have been tested for anthrax exposure. NBC's Frederica Whitfield joins us now live from Boca Raton with the latest. Hi there, Frederica.
Hi there, Dan. Well, the examination of this 65,000 square foot building, the headquarters of AMI, has intensified since investigators announced that a third person had been exposed to anthrax. That person is a 35-year-old woman. She is unidentified because she does not want anyone to know who she is. Apparently, she worked in the mailroom. Authorities are telling NBC News that, in fact, investigators have confined the spaces of the anthrax particles to two areas within the building: the mailroom, where the woman I just mentioned worked, as well as a 73-year-old man who tested positive for anthrax exposure. He worked in that mailroom. And then there's an area where the photo editor, who died last Friday, worked. Particles were found on his computer keyboard. Investigators are still saying that they do believe this is a criminal investigation, that the anthrax particles came to this building intentionally set by someone, somehow, but investigators say they don't have any evidence leading them to believe that this anthrax contamination has anything to do with the September 11th terrorist attacks. Now, as you might imagine, among the AMI workers, an awful lot of people are very nervous and alarmed because of these findings, and as a result of the third person detected with anthrax exposure. And even non-AMI workers have expressed concern and worry about the investigation here and the contents of the building, according to the mayor, who I just talked to a little while ago, the mayor of Boca Raton, Stephen Abrams.
I think a lot of folks are following this through the media and understand that it's at one building, understand that even if it went beyond that, it's very difficult to contract. It's not contagious, the disease, and so we're relying on that. But we are hearing from others who have expressed a lot of concern, understandably, and a lot of worry about the health and criminal threat that this possibly poses to our community.
Federal investigator. Now, Dan, as you mentioned, 1,000 nose swabs tests have been taken from people who have been in and out of this building. Authorities say they have test results now of 700 of those nose swabs, and they're still awaiting the results of the 300 or so remaining ones. Back to you, Dan.
All right, Frederica Whitfield, thank you very much. Appreciate that. Our coverage of home front security continues. Coming up, safety in the skies. Should pilots really warn passengers to take matters into their own hands if something happens in flight? A debate coming up. And throughout the show, we'll be showing you pictures of the 22 suspects on the new FBI terrorist wanted list. If you have any information on the suspects, you can call the FBI hotline. The number is 1-866-483-5137. You can see all the suspects on MSNBC.com.
Multi-pronged and long-sustained attack.
Other influential religious groups are now calling for a jihad.
Citizens of Kabul now are fleeing.
This campaign is far from over.
The highest state of alert by the Coast Guard since World War II.
And more importantly, the unexpected. What will happen next?
Why are so many people switching to IDT long distance?
5 cents, actually. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you for joining IDT. Enjoy the savings.
Because we offer the simplest low-cost long-distance plan available. Just 5 cents a minute, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, for every state-to-state long-distance call you make. We don't waste money on celebrities and gimmicks. We just offer the best long-distance available at the lowest possible price. Just 5 cents a minute, all day long, every single day of the week. And IDT has 6-second billing, so you never get charged for time you don't use. No complicated billing plans with rates that change depending on the time of day. No prepayments for time you may lose, and no annoying 1010 numbers to dial. Just the best long distance available at the lowest possible price. For real savings in the real world, call IDT right now. We're waiting for your call.
5 cents a minute, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. IDT long distance. No one does it for less.
One company provides total document solutions for business. One company offers digital copiers that scan, print, fax, and finish. One company makes the most earth-friendly printers and copiers on the planet. One company has a printer drum that lasts 30 times longer. One company. Kyocera Mita.
In a world where financial services come in shades of gray, ING Direct introduces the Orange Savings Account, where everyone earns the same high 4% rate. With no minimum balance requirements and no fees. So that means compared to the average bank savings account, you'll earn over twice as much on every dollar saved. You don't even have to change banks. Keep your existing checking account and simply transfer money back and forth whenever you want by calling 1-800-ING-DIRECT or by visiting ingdirect.com. Plus, your deposits are FDIC insured. Still think there's a catch? There isn't one. You just didn't have a choice before.
Call 1-800-ING-DIRECT or visit us online at ingdirect.com. Enjoy one of the highest yield savings accounts in America with no fees and no minimums. And the peace of mind of knowing your account is FDIC insured and backed by ING, one of the world's largest financial organizations. 1-800-ING-DIRECT.
When we're talking about the issue of home front security, there is nothing more serious than the release just now from the FBI. This from their news release. I'll read it to you. Certain information, while not specific as to target, gives the government reason to believe that there may be additional terrorist attacks within the United States and against U.S. interests overseas over the next several days. The FBI has again alerted all law enforcement to be on the highest alert, and we call on all people to immediately notify the FBI and local law enforcement of any unusual or suspicious activity. Now, when the FBI does this, they are reaching out to local law enforcement. They've been working with local law enforcement on this throughout the weeks. We're now joined by NBC's Justice Department correspondent Pete Williams from Washington. Pete, what do you know?
Well, Dan, you know, I suspect we're going to get many of these in the months to come. What officials tell us is that this is not from information developed by the FBI in its own investigation, which of course leads one to conclude the only other possibility is that it came from intelligence sources. And I would say that these sorts of things have been picked up by intelligence in the past, warning of some vague kind of unspecific threat against the United States. And in months past, this might result in some kind of notice being put out by the State Department for Americans overseas. But now, out of an abundance of caution, the government is passing these things along to local law enforcement. They'll do the same thing they did on Sunday when they notified the 18,000 local police agencies, state police agencies nationwide, and also the corporate people that subscribe to their alert warning system, that there's no specific target, which would indicate this intelligence doesn't pick up that they've said that some place in the United States or some specific building, but rather it's a time element that sometime within the next several days, and it does say that it could be attacks within the U.S. or against U.S. interests overseas. So this is the way these intelligence intercepts or intelligence bits of information have tended to be nonspecific this way, just attacks against Americans somewhere, whether here or overseas. So just out of an abundance of caution, the FBI is passing this along, telling everyone once again to be extra vigilant and extra watchful.
Pete, let me just ask you, they've got to know that a warning like this is going to send shivers through communities around this country. Knowing that, does that tell us that there is an even higher level of certainty related to this particular threat? I mean, you say that we do expect more of these.
Yes, I wouldn't think so. This is not the first one since September 11th, and I think there'll be more. And I think whether it sends shivers or not, the government wants to be extra careful and not be in the position of saying, yeah, well, we heard some warnings, but we didn't want to send shivers, so we didn't send it out. I think they will now err on the side of caution every time and put this kind of information out. But I just say that, it raises an inevitable question, well, how good is this? And I don't think there's a way to answer that question. Because, as I say, the intelligence apparatus picks these things up all the time, and sometimes you can assess them as being from a very credible source or someone who has been predictive of these things in the past. Sometimes you can't, and I don't think they're making any kind of differentiation. Anytime they hear one of these things, they're going to pass it along.
Pete, you've been doing a lot of stories in the last few weeks about the beefing up of security. What do you think we can expect? I mean, are we expecting now, as a result of this, even tighter security around the country?
I would think not. This is just the same kind of warning that was put out at the time that military hostilities commenced, based again on intelligence information that suggested there might be attacks against Americans at home or overseas when we commenced military action against the Taliban in Afghanistan. The FBI put a warning out. Now they're putting out another one. Airports are at a high state of security. Police departments are extra vigilant. So it's hard to imagine now that this warning is going to result in ratcheting it up yet again. There may be some minor changes. For example, the nation's railroads voluntarily on their own decided to stop shipping hazardous materials a few days after the military attacks began. Now we're told they've decided to start those up again. This may cause them to stop those. So I would see, in certain industries, specific kinds of things like that. But in terms of security that you and I are going to see from day to day, I would doubt that this will make that much of a difference because it's already ratcheted up about as high as it's going to go.
Yeah, because I think the question some people would say is, boy, are we suddenly going to see, bridges and tunnels closed around this country? I mean,
that will be a question for each locality to make on its own, a decision for each municipality, each state, each city, each county to make on its own.
Okay, Pete Williams, thanks very much.
Yes,
again, Pete telling us to keep this in perspective, and that is that we have seen these types of warnings come out before. This is quite a specific one coming out on the FBI website. I want to bring in Representative Jeff Flake, who we had actually invited on this program to talk about a completely separate issue. But Representative, while we have you here, what do you make of this warning from the FBI?
Well, I think Pete said it very well. It's incumbent on all of us to be extra careful, and we need to take these warnings, I think, in the spirit that they're offered. Be extra careful, but not curtail our activities or go out of our way to stay at home or anything like that. This is not the first, as he mentioned, and it's going to be up to the individual localities and governmental units at the local level as to how they respond. But as individuals, I think we need to go about our activities, but simply be extra careful and report activities that we see that might be suspicious.
Yeah, and I think that's the issue. I mean, I think some people will say, what does it mean to be extra careful? I mean, you know, and I've heard people ask this to the Attorney General as well. You know, if your constituents said to your representative, what am I supposed to do? They keep telling me to be extra careful and extra vigilant. What does that mean?
Well, exactly what it says. Be extra careful and look around you and see if you see anything suspicious. And if you do, don't just file it away. Actually tell somebody about it. If everybody does that, we stand a much better chance of actually curtailing these activities before they start.
How do you think we go about balancing the need to let people know, meaning informing people that there is a threat out there, or at least, you know, something seems to be out there, versus the problem of potentially just getting a lot of people scared?
Well, as Pete said, I think the government is going to err on the side of caution, and when they get these kind of threats, if they consider them credible, they're going to let us know, as they should. I think the population appreciates that, and as time goes on, we may take it less seriously unless something does happen. But we need to be on guard. I, for myself, certainly am more careful than I was before.
And based on what you're hearing on Capitol Hill, is this surprising to you that we're getting this warning from the FBI?
No, not at all. We were told from the beginning that as soon as we started the attack that there would be threats. And we've seen them, and we'll see more of them. So I don't think it's surprising to anyone.
And so I think it's probably fair to say that while this is a serious warning, people should put it into perspective. And that is, as Pete Williams pointing out, and as you're pointing out, we have known that there were risks out there. The Attorney General has been saying it. I'm going to read again from the FBI website. This again has just come out, and I want to read you exactly what it says there on the site, although it's now on the monitor. Certain information, while not specific as to target, gives the government reason to believe that there may be additional terrorist attacks within the United States and against U.S. interests overseas over the next several days. The FBI has again alerted all local law enforcement to be on the highest alert, and we call on all people to immediately notify the FBI and local law enforcement of any unusual or suspicious activity. You know, Congressman, one thing I can say from having been covering the domestic security front for the last few weeks is, you know, I think that people, to a certain degree, can be assured that there is hypervigilance. I mean, we do see people being arrested at water plants, for example, when they really weren't doing anything. Right. They just happened to be there. And yet the authorities are on such super sensitive patrol. That should, I think, assure people to a certain degree that law enforcement is really out there with their eyes wide open.
Right. Not only law enforcement, but you saw what happened on the plane yesterday or the day before when there was a passenger who wasn't quite all there rushing the cockpit. Other passengers took him down. And so it's not just law enforcement, it's individuals who are paying more attention, and that's good, but we ought to.
Anything else that you can make of with regard to this report? I mean, again, I just think that this is such an important thing to put into context, and having someone like yourself, you know, on the program at this time, I think again it's important for you to reiterate for us what context we should look at this in.
Right. I would say don't be surprised at all. We shouldn't be surprised. We were told before, as soon as we started to attack, that we would see these kind of threats, and we're seeing them. So I'm just glad that the administration is being aware and are letting us know so we can be extra careful. But I'm going about my daily activities as I was before. I'm just being a little more careful at what I look for.
All right, Representative Flake, thanks very much. We appreciate it. We had, of course, scheduled to have you on a different topic, but it was great to have you here when this came over the wires. Christopher Whitcomb is on the telephone now. He is an FBI veteran. He's been with the FBI for 15 years, particularly dealing with counterterrorism issues. Chris, you there?
Yes, good. Hi, Dan.
Hi there. What do you make of this announcement, this warning from the FBI on the website?
Well, I was actually watching you doing your report when I saw you get this, and I thought immediately here that this is a very, very difficult thing for the administration and for the FBI to walk a line between caution and alarm, and that they are probably just doing the prudent thing here, trying to let people know that there is a threat But I think I agree with the congressman entirely that we need to go on with our lives and just be cautious, to keep our eyes open. But we can't stop every time we get a threat. Otherwise, we'll go through this time and time again.
But Chris, look, people are seeing this and they're saying, this sounds ominous. And I think as Pete and I think as Representative Flake have pointed out, this almost is nothing new from the last month, right?
Well, no, look, we're living in times of heightened caution. There's no doubt about that. But I think the FBI certainly here is doing everything they can to say, look, we're all in this. Everybody's in this thing. They have 10,000, 11,000 agents working the street. The intelligence community is working overtime on this thing. Everybody's doing what they can, but saying, look, the American public really has to understand that they're part of this thing too. If you see something, if you see behavior, not appearance, but behavior that you think is troublesome, then please, notify the local authorities. But this is just caution, and I don't think it's cause for alarm.
Chris, the FBI website was, though, somewhat specific when it said the next several days. Based on your experience, what does that tell you about the sort of information? Of course, we have no idea exactly what information we're talking about, but what genre of information are we talking about?
Well, we're talking about, intelligence collected by agencies around the world, really. And the FBI saying, look, if they had a specific credible threat, they would certainly do something about it. And you have to understand that. But if they have credible information about something they overheard or something they got through an interview, something they gathered during the investigation, they feel now that they have an obligation, I'm sure, to tell the American people about this, to try and increase the level of awareness. And I think that's all this is. I think it's part of a policy now that they're probably coming out with these threats to try and let people know that they have to be vigilant, that they have to look around and report this information. But if it were something more specific, then they would take specific action to let these people, any potential targets know. You have to understand the difference between the two.
And it's a tough balancing act, right? I mean, we were talking about this with Representative Flake. I mean, this balancing act between informing the public, we deserve to know on the one hand, and on the other hand, not instilling unnecessary fear.
No, I agree with you 100%. And it is a very difficult balancing act. And I think the FBI has been very, very prudent doing this so far, that they have said, look, we are going to tell you, feel confident that we are going to tell you when we have a threat, and feel very confident that if we have a specific threat, we're going to deal with it. So I think all Americans really throughout the world have to understand that we're all part of this thing now, and we all share in a responsibility that if the FBI says look around a little more cautiously, that we have to take them at their word.
And very quickly, Chris, I've never seen law enforcement on this much high alert. That should reassure people to a certain degree, right?
It definitely should. The fact that they're getting this information to begin with is very reassuring. The fact that they're getting information that they can put out as a caution to the American people is very reassuring. I know, because I speak with my friends and former colleagues, that they're doing everything humanly possible. They're working extraordinary hours with extraordinary amount of vigor on this thing.
Chris, I'm going to ask you to stand by for a moment. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll come back and talk to you more in a moment.